part of the Press Play Podcast Network.
Good day, everybody, and welcome to the Sabol Brothers on the Baseline podcast. I'm your host, Scott Sabol.
And I'm John Sabol. How you guys doing?
Yeah, it's going to be a fun interview here. You know, we kind of went from Brown season. You know, the Cavs are still obviously playing currently, and now we're heading after the lockout finally into Guardian season, Major League Baseball. And this is going to be a fun, it's funny because we are setting this up talking to the guest, who is, of course, Brian Anderson, the former Indians pitcher from the 90s and early 2000s. And I remember you were talking to him like, all right, Brian, this is how we want to do it. You know, we have this amount of time dedicated. And he's like, wait a minute, I have a lot of good stuff here. This is going to go a lot longer, which is great. And so we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, Brian is very similar like me, man. Like, we love to tell stories and we can talk. So I anticipate this going a little bit longer, and that's cool too, because I'm sure he's going to tell us some good inside stories about his baseball career, his time with the Indians, and of course, winning a World Series. Not many people can say that. I believe, Scott, this is the first time we've ever had a World Series champion on the podcast.
I think you were exactly correct. Yeah, hopefully the first of many. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, hopefully. So yeah, this is going to be fun. Brian and I go back to our days of working in Tampa. He's still down there. He is the Tampa Bay Rays color analyst for Bally Sports Sun down there. And we would, work together down when I worked down in Tampa. And then of course he lived, a few streets away. So this would be a fun homecoming, if you will, for me, at least, to talk to him a little bit about our Tampa roots, but also about all Indians and baseball stuff.
Yep. We're going to talk about his history. We're going to talk about him growing up in Cleveland. We're going to talk about college, how baseball has changed since, because he's only a couple years older than me. So, we kind of grew up, in the same era, and all of his adventures too. This should be a really fun podcast, and I'm really looking forward to it. And we'll have more coming right up on the Sabol Brothers on the Baseline podcast right after this.
What's up, everyone? Chase Smith here, host of the Chase Smith podcast, and my podcast reflects who I am. My hobbies, my interests, my passions, my curiosities, my careers, my questions, and my family. I'll spend time talking about all types of sports, movies, TV shows, trending news stories, and other cultural events, and even faith. This is who I am, and I hope I can get to know you as well. Join me on the Chase Smith podcast, and let's have some thought-provoking conversations, only on the Press Play Podcast Network.
Hey everybody, it's Sam Amico from Cavs on the Break NBA podcast. Be sure to give us a listen for all your Cleveland Cavaliers recaps, analysis, breakdowns, draft talk, free agency. The list goes on and on. Give us a listen, Cavs on the Break NBA podcast.
Hey everyone, this is Mike Voorhees.
And I'm Brian Shaw. No, not the pitcher. We're the Guardians of the Land MLB podcast, formerly a Swingin' a Tribe.
Don't have time to watch 162 games of baseball? We do. We have you covered with recaps of the games, stats, and analysis throughout the MLB season.
Subscribe now to Guardians of the Land and Press Play Pods for all your Cleveland sports analysis.
Another changeup and a strikeout as Anderson back-to-back strikeouts to start the 10th.
Brian Anderson using that changeup very well as the first fastball misses. The changeup 1-1. Another change is low. This fastball is high, and the 3-2 changeup gets it.
Welcome back to Sabol Brothers on the Baseline, right here on the Press Play Podcast Network. This is going to be a fun talk here. Fun little guest, too. Anybody growing up in the Cleveland area in the 90s will know him from his 3-year stint playing for the Cleveland Indians. And anybody listening to this down in the Tampa Bay area will know him from the Rays color broadcaster for Bally Sports Sun. And we were just talking about this off camera. My former neighbor down in Tampa, we lived right down the street from each other before I moved back to Cleveland. This is Brian Anderson. Welcome to the podcast, BA. How you been?
You know what? Fantastic, especially with the baseball season finally getting up and started here. Couldn't be better.
Yeah, this is the lockout, man. I don't want to talk about the lockout because I'm glad it's over with. We don't need to go through all that stuff, but glad we at least have a season, a full 162 season. And we're ready to go here with opening day just right around the corner in just a few days as we record this interview with you here on April 5th.
Now, John, before we go any further here, because we were talking to Brian off camera, he, and this is shameless self-promotion here. Now, Brian was talking about his absolute favorite, news station. Brian, would you mind putting this on the record just for myself and, because I might need this as leverage later on down the line?
Yeah, well, you know what? Quite simply, I've been down here doing the color analyst job for the Tampa Bay Rays full-time since, 2011. So it was, the season down here, much like when I was playing for other teams outside of Cleveland, I would have the season wherever that would be. And when the season was over, I would pick up and I would move back to Cleveland. That's home. That's where I go. That's where my family is. And so it was, an easy decision. And so, going back since I've been down here in Tampa and moving back to Cleveland, I'm not a big news watcher. A lot of it's not very good. But the one thing that I am interested in the late fall and winter in Cleveland is the weather. So it was every morning, wake up, flip on Fox 8 News to get the local weather, figure out what was going to be happening that day and what was going to be predicted for the week. And my wife and I at the time now, Jessica, we would always cross the fingers that it was going to be Scott Sabol giving us that weather, because we knew that at the end of the day, that was going to be the best version of the morning weather. And so now that we've come full circle and I'm on this podcast with you, it's kind of crazy because you were our go-to guy and would get us through the day, get us through the week, get us through the weekend, whatever it may be. And you did a great job and continue to do a great job with what you do.
I really appreciate that. That really means a lot because, sometimes we get behind the camera. We don't know all the people that we talk to and meet, like what we're talking here. So anyway, that's kind of cool. I appreciate the kind words.
Well, you know what it is?
What's that?
You know what it is? Listen, the weather is the weather, but it's the manner in which it's disseminated to the people at home. You know what I mean? And some people are going to do it in an entertaining way. Some people are going to be very matter of fact and not show a whole lot of personality. And so, we always enjoyed your forecasts and your weather hits, because there was a certain entertainment value about it. And so we get the weather, we get a little personality with it. Everybody wins.
All right. Good deal. I appreciate that. That's a nice little breakdown. I love that.
And everyone that's listening here, no, I or Scott did not pay Brian to say that.
We did. No, we did not. No, we did not. It's all organic here. It's funny because, John, we were talking about the, preparing for the podcast here. And these are my notes right here on 1/2 sheet of paper, because I figured, the notes we're going to give Brian, we're going to give you a couple of sentences and you're going to take off with it because you have a wealth of knowledge. And we're going to start really, John, from the beginning, right?
Yeah, let's do that, because people don't know or may not realize that, Brian, you're an Ohio guy. You went to Geneva, you went to Wright State. You had family that live in here in Northeastern Ohio. You lived here in Northeastern Ohio up until about, recently when you moved full time down in Tampa. You lived in Sugar Falls. So, Ohio to you in the Cleveland area, you were the direct opposite of what people do in snowbirds. When the snow and the winter came, you left Florida, came to Cleveland up until this year, where now you're a full-time Floridian resident.
Yeah, no, listen, I was born in Portsmouth, Virginia. My father was in the Navy, and he was stationed down in Norfolk, Oceana, the Air Force or the naval base down there. And so that's where I was born. By the time I was 2 years old, they were back. They grew up in Geneva. So we came back when my father got out of the service, and that was home. And so baseball was my jam. Baseball was my passion, my love, loved all sports, but really took it had a love affair with baseball. Did it, when spring would break, get into summer. That's what I did all day, as long as I could. And my father's a huge baseball guy. And so it was just a natural fit, a natural love. Growing up, loving the Indians, loving Major League Baseball, and saying to myself, that's what I want to do. That's what I want to do, is I want to play in the big leagues. And I can still remember most of the games that we went to when I was young, very young, were going to be day games. So we would go to church, and you'd have Sunday school, and then there'd be like a 15-minute break, and then everybody would go into big church, is what we call it. And in between Sunday school and big church, every now and then my father would be like, by the way, we're not going to big church today. We're going to an Indians game. And it was like, oh, yeah, it was the greatest thing ever. And I would anxiously await the drive as we would come up to old Cleveland Municipal Stadium.
Oh, yeah.
And coming, from east to west, the first thing that you saw was Chief Wahoo, leg up, bat in his hand. And that was the most glorious thing that I had ever seen. And then getting a chance to go to that stadium and, to watch a big league game, that was, those were the greatest days of my life growing up. No doubt about it.
I'll never forget that too, because I have a similar story. My first Indians game, I was at, because we had instead of Sunday school on Sunday, sometimes we would have it during the week. And I remember it was on a Tuesday, and my dad was saying, John, this is before you were born, but it was 1980, 81, something like that. And my dad had tickets to a Yankees game, and it was like on a Tuesday night. And so he said, I'm picking you up early from Sunday school, and we're going up to the stadium. And I'll never forget the drive up there. Same kind of thing. We came from a different direction, but walking up the tunnel and then seeing this grass, and it's like, I've never seen anything like this in my life.
Okay, I didn't want to go that far, but yeah. that really was the thing with me too, because you get into this old cement stadium and you're walking around the concourse, and then you would walk up that ramp that had a slight incline. And when you got to the top of it and you looked out and you saw that beautiful green grass, cut in the shape of a baseball field, glorious, absolutely glorious. I mean, that was the Mecca.
And then right after that, what I would do, because we had a pretty big backyard growing up. Now the trees are so big, and so I was allowed to cut the grass. Well, you had like a little like Sears Craftsman tractor, and so I'm like, hey, Dad, I didn't understand that was sod, and so one day I go out there and drop the mower deck all the way down to like a half of an inch, and I scalped the crap out of the backyard. Dad's like, what are you doing? Well, I'm trying to turn it into what I saw, at the stadium. And he kind of just it grew back, but yeah, same kind of thing. I wanted to make it look just like that. And I kind of backfired, but the same kind of thing.
Brian, Scott
was in the right place though.
Yeah, right.
What Scott would do though, too, is when he got older, he would literally cut the grass in diamonds, the diamond pattern of the outfield in the backyard of our parents' house in Hudson. And when we would go throw the baseball around or hit the ball, because it was a fairly big backyard, it literally, when you're, a younger kid, you'd think, wow, this is like kind of like the, Municipal Stadium or the then Jacobs Field grass. So
of course we had a lot of clover and daffodil, all that stuff, but it served its purpose.
Yeah, but he'd go back and
from
forth.
Afar, I'm sure it looked amazing, and you certainly felt like you were on a big league field. So
right.
That's the whole point.
Exactly.
It's funny, Brian. I was young during the Municipal Stadium era days, but I remember it. I remember going to games there with my brother and with my dad. And what you guys talk about, the tunnel effect, you're totally right. I mean, a lot of those older stadiums built in that era were like that. Tiger Stadium, Yankee Stadium were very similar into that feel. And then, of course, they, went on to Jacobs Field, which was just, immaculate. And it's funny, looking at your baseball reference page, Brian, I was wondering, because I know you broke in the majors in 93 to see if you ever played against the Indians in Municipal, but you didn't. You only played 4 games that year. And then 94, you were still with the Angels, but the Indians had moved to Jacobs Field.
Yeah, no, you know what? My only, really the only time that Municipal Stadium was open to me and I was exposed to it was, I remember coming into my senior year of high school, which would have been 1990, I was invited up to Municipal Stadium as far as like a pre-draft workout type deal. And I cannot remember the name of the kid, but the Indians, he was a left-handed hitter. The Indians ended up taking him in the second round out of West Virginia, University of West Virginia. And I think that he was a football player too. And he was who I was matched up against, again, high school senior. And I had a very good day against him and threw the ball very well that day. Problem was I wasn't big enough. I didn't light up the radar gun coming out of high school. So it was a wonderful experience to get that kind of exposure, but nothing ever came of it. And then fast forward a couple of years, in 1992, I was playing on Team USA, and that was an Olympic year. So we were traveling the country playing exhibitions against other countries before a big league game would take place. And we played a game, and it might have been against Korea, if I remember correctly, may not be right, maybe Nicaragua. But we played a game against somebody before a Cleveland Indian game at Municipal Stadium. I didn't play in that game. I didn't pitch in that game, but I was there for that too. But those are the only 2 times that I was able to get down on that field. And realized, by the way, at that point, it wasn't as great as I thought when I was a little kid.
Of course not. We've had countless former Indians and Browns players on the podcast talking about how bad the stadium was to play in and to be around.
They painted the grass during football season. They would spray, they would spray paint the dirt to have it appear as if there was still grass on the field. That's all you need to know.
Yes.
Hey, BA, real quick, just let you know, that guy they took, Daryl Whitmore.
Yes. Daryl Whitmore. That name, yes, that's it. That was it.
And if it makes you feel any better, he only played 3 years in the majors, all with the Marlins, 93 to 95, and then fizzled out and spent the last 9 years of his career in the minors. So you had a better career than him.
Wow. Yeah. Well, you know what? Think about that, though. You get 3 years in the big leagues, and then for 9 more, you pound away trying to get back. That just shows you, the love that guys have for this game, with the belief that I can always try to get back there and give up a decade of your life trying to do it. And, it's just the hold this game has on some guys. Was I right about the round, though? Was it second round?
Let me double check. Hold on. Because you got West Virginia right, and it said he was an outfielder.
Yeah. Big, athletic, strong guy. I swear he played football too. He was a monster.
He's a big dude, huh?
Yeah.
So I just closed it. Here it is. So he was 6'1", 210, batted left through right.
That was pretty big back then.
He was round
For
2.
me, coming out of high school at 5'11", about $165. Yeah, he was huge.
Yeah. He was in the second round. You got that right. Pick number 46.
There you go. Okay,
how about
good.
that? Yeah.
Just didn't know the name. That's probably the most important thing.
I'd have to go look up to see if he played football, but man, that is crazy that happened, and we actually ended up finding his stats and everything like that. That's fun.
Brian, you mentioned that you didn't light up the radar gun, and I want to circle back to that. You didn't light up the radar gun in high school, but remind me, John or Brian, to circle back to that, because I got a question about that. But first off, you also play golf too, is that right?
Yeah, played golf. That's a funny story too, because I was good enough at baseball that my parents didn't want me to play football, but I wanted to play football. I mean, I just had an inkling to play football. I love the sport. I almost love football more than I love baseball, even though I never played it. I just love the fact that I believe that football is the ultimate team sport. You have 11 guys, against 11 guys. One guy doesn't do his assignment, the whole play falls apart. I mean, it's the ultimate team sport, and I wanted to play. So in 8th grade, my parents told me, you can play, but you're only allowed to play 1 year. Okay, what good does that do? I mean, you only get to play. So I remember going to the off-season workouts. We would play during the summer, getting my physical, getting fitted for cleats, the whole thing. And the more that I thought about it, I'm like, gosh, just 1 year. And if I have a really good year and I'm really good at it, which I thought I could be, then what? And a buddy of mine, Dale Arkenberg, who, to this day, we're very dear friends. In fact, his son now is a pitcher at Marshall University. He was the longtime fire department fire chief out in Geneva, just retired. He called me and said, hey, you want to go out golfing? So we went out and golfed, and long story short, really enjoyed the game. Figured I'd be able to do it more than 1 year because it wasn't a contact sport. And I ended up moving away from football and golfing, and then ended up golfing the 4 years in high school. And we had a very good team. Didn't end up doing as much as we should have, but we had a good team, a competitive team. Got to play some awesome courses, and so I got to do that for 4 years. And then once I got into pro ball, would play courses here or there. Funnest thing I probably did was I had probably a 6 or 7 year span where we would go out to the Baseball World Series of Golf at Pebble Beach.
Wow.
And you'd go out there. Yeah, it was the week before Thanksgiving. And initially you'd play Pebble Beach, Poppy Hills, Spanish Bay, and Spyglass Hill. And then after a few years of that, Poppy Hills dropped out of the rotation. So you played Spyglass, Spanish Bay, and you played Pebble Beach twice. And it was phenomenal. You'd get about 140, 150 players, a couple of umpires, a few coaches. And that was just amazing getting to play those courses, especially Pebble, with all the history and everything that has gone on at that course was absolutely awesome.
So this is an interesting question. So you're an upbeat guy, extroverted personality. You talk about how you were able to play golf and do all these things. And it seems like, and this is going to sound weird saying this, but you have a lot of confidence in your ability. Was there ever a time in the past where you doubted your ability? And I say this because there's a lot of athletes sometimes that end up with what they call the imposter syndrome. They don't feel like they belong. They end up kind of getting in their own head, and sometimes they need a sports psychologist to kind of get out of that. Did you ever have any issues with that when you played sports in high school and college, or were you always kind of driven and you never had that kind of issue?
13 years old. Easy question. 13 years old. When I look at the leagues nowadays that my children have played in and friends of mine, their kids have played in, there's a graduation. You start at Little League and you're pitching from 45 feet and you've got 60-foot baselines. And then the next year you're pitching from, 50 feet and you've got, 70-foot baselines. And you gradually build your way up to now all of a sudden you're playing on a field that is 60 feet, 6 inches from the pitcher's mound, the rubber to the plate, and 90-foot baselines. When I was growing up, probably the same for you, there was not that graduation. You played Little League. I played Little League sanctioned baseball, through the age of 12. And we pitched from 45 feet and we had 60-foot baselines. And then I turned 13 and they threw us out on a field, 60 feet, 6 inches, 90-foot baselines. And I can remember going into senior league, which was that next league, for the first couple of weeks being introduced to a real Major League Baseball diamond. I thought to myself, well, maybe I won't play big league baseball. I mean, because that's all I thought growing up. I'm playing in the big leagues. I'm going to be on a baseball card. I'm going to play in these unbelievable stadiums in front of tons of people. And then I got on the big field and I thought, well, maybe I'm not. I mean, there was a fear of getting a base hit to right field and getting thrown out at first base because you're running 30 extra feet. I mean, it was such culture shock. And then after a couple of weeks of getting used to those dimensions, I'm like, nah, I'm good. I'm going back to the big leagues. And that really was it. The only doubt that came in was 13 years old for probably 2 weeks.
That's fantastic.
Wow. That's crazy. It's funny you mentioned that imposter syndrome, Scott. Brian, I don't know how much you've been following what the Guardians are doing, and we'll talk about that in a moment here. But they just announced their opening day roster a few days ago, and they had a surprise rookie. There was 3 rookies on the team, and one guy who no one had ever heard of here in Cleveland in the media, really, unless you cover the minor league farm system, is a guy by the name of Stephen Kwan. And he made the team. And I just did a story with him for Fox 8 yesterday about his, journey to the big leagues. And the big story about him was how he suffered from imposter syndrome and got down on himself at Oregon State and nearly quit baseball because of it and had to go to a sports psychologist, had to go, in the lab and rework his swing and mechanics. And the rest is history. And he, went Oregon State to the College World Series and all that stuff. And now he's on the Guardians opening day roster. And that is a real thing. So it's an interesting question for athletes of all ages and levels.
Baseball is not for the faint of heart. Baseball, if you don't have thick skin, you're not going to make it in this game very long because, you think about how skilled that you have to be. Whether you're trying to throw a baseball from 60 feet, 6 inches away into a small little window with different grips and different spins, and be consistent at being able to do that. Then you think about the hitter and his end of things where he's got to hone his swing to where he has very little time from the time the ball comes out of the hand to making a decision. What's the pitch? Where's it going to end up? Do I swing or don't I? I mean, that all happens in tenths of seconds. Mm-hmm. And so you think about all the skill that's involved, the speed at which the game is played, especially when you're down on the field. And I'll get back to a funny story about that when I'm done with this little rant. And the fact that it's played every single day, there's no let up. There's no let up. You get into a little bit of a funk. You don't have a couple of days to take a breather and then fix it. You are playing every single day. It's unrelenting, and it can be very tough on a player's, psyche. I mean, there were certainly times, not really through high school, certainly not in college, but once you get into professional ball, yes, you are going to go through some times where it can be difficult. It can be difficult, and you're searching for answers, but you're searching for them on the fly because tomorrow's coming quick, and you don't have a whole lot of time.
Yeah. And the fact that the minors are not making a whole lot of money, even with the changes that they're making now. And so you don't have those resources, especially back then, that maybe players do now to try to find help to get over that, whether it's, especially if it's a psychological, thing that you need to be, that needs to be addressed.
Such a bigger part of the game now. I look at the resources that these players have nowadays, and it's incredible. I mean, between just the training room, the way that their bodies are maintained, the physical therapists that are on call, the massage therapists that live at the stadium, the mental health coaches. I mean, you go down, they've got sleep rooms now, literally sleep pods where they can go and just chill before a game. The resources are there because people have realized how important it is in a game that's very mentally and physically, for that part, but very mentally demanding and challenging. But, going back to what I was talking about, the speed of the game on the field, funny story. We were in a rain delay when I was with the Indians, and I can't remember if it was 96 or 97, but one of those years we're in a rain delay, and Mike Hargrove, we're sitting on the, in the dugout, kind of waiting this thing out. And there's a few of us there, and Mike Hargrove made a point that has stuck with me, to this day. And he said, the interesting thing about this game, he said, the further you get away from it, the easier it looks. He said, you sit in the dugout and there's a ball hit out into the gap. You know exactly where the cutoff men should be lined up, where the pitcher should be. Everything's, an open canvas happening out in front of you, and it's all right. He said, you go into the stands, the pitches don't look quite as hard. You have a better perspective of seeing where things should be. Just looks easier. He said, you watch a game on TV and it looks like a piece of cake. Just keep throwing it to that spot. The guy can't hit it. He said, until you get out there, until you get out on that field and you realize the windows are small, the ball comes off the bat and the game moves at a breakneck pace, you just don't get that feel from TV, even to the stands, even to the dugout. And he is so right. I'll never forget him telling us that and thinking, boy, that's absolutely so true. And to this day, like I said, I watch a game on TV and I chuckle because I'm like, it's not that easy. And it doesn't move that slow. I promise you.
Hey, speaking of the Indians, and I wanted to get your thoughts on this real quick of your day you found out you're getting traded to the Indians, because you broke camp and broke your career with the California Angels. Then, 93, 96 in February, right before spring training starts, you get traded to Cleveland. Do you remember who you got traded for?
Pep Harris and Jason Grimsley. And I knew it was going to be Cleveland before that. That's an interesting story. So I was with the Angels, 94, 95. In 95, I did not have the strongest of years. And so going into that season, whatever my contract was, they had cut me back to the league minimum and they had taken out all my incentives. And that was something that you couldn't do. Like there was you had a 20% rule. You couldn't cut a guy's contract by more than 20%. I don't think mine was 20%, but by taking out my incentives, that became an issue. So we called the Angels on it, said, you can't do that. And they refused to budge. And so this went back and forth. And finally it got to the point where the situation was untenable. And I said, you know what? We're going to consider filing for free agency. And I would have won. And I could have become a free agent and gone on the open market. It would be like getting drafted all over again. And it ended up happening that they gave us permission to talk to Cleveland. And so we talked to Cleveland, worked out a contract. And then from my understanding, there was a package of players that was offered to the Angels. You can have these two or these two. or some combination of the four. And it ended up being Pep Harris and Jason Grimsley. But before that was finalized, I already knew I was coming back home.
What was that moment like, and where were you?
You know what? I was at an apartment down in Dayton, Ohio, where I had lived in the off season and getting ready for spring training, and, couldn't be more thrilled because, going into the draft in 1993, I wanted to be drafted by the Cleveland Indians. I was going to be, going into that season, I was supposed to be, they were projecting me mid to late first round. And so, okay, that's fine. I played on Team USA the year before, a couple of seasons in the Cape Cod League, and had gotten some good exposure. That's where they're talking. Well, we go out to Arizona my junior year, which is my draft year. We go out to play University of Arizona, and at the end of that year, Arizona, if their top three starters were not injured, that team probably walks away with a national championship easy because they had the number one offense in college baseball, and it wasn't even close. I mean, over 10 runs a game, most doubles, most homers, highest slug. I mean, they just were loaded. They had all 8 of their position players either get drafted or sign as, undrafted free agents into Pro Bowl. They just were a loaded team. And we went out there to play them in a 2-game series, and I was going to pitch the second game. And we had a good team at Wright State, very good team. And we went out there, game 1, they beat us 17-5. I mean, they just thrashed us all over the field. No one really ever did that to us. And then the next night I went out and through a complete game, we beat them 5-3. And I think I went 12 strikeouts, no walks, 9 innings. And by the time that plane landed back in Dayton, they were saying top 5, top 10 draft pick. And so that was kind of the focus. I think the Indians that year were drafting 11th. So it got to the point late in the process that I realized I probably wasn't going to fall to 11. And so that's what I was kind of hoping for. And it didn't happen. I got drafted by the Angels as the 3rd pick overall. And then a couple of years later, I ended up back in Cleveland, no matter. And so it was such a thrill knowing that how badly I wanted to get drafted by them, contact with people in their front office during the draft process, realizing then it wasn't going to happen. But just a few short years later, I was back there, albeit on a team that was so loaded that I was going to spend a lot of time in Buffalo, which I did.
So you had mentioned that you didn't light up the radar gun in high school, and then you make it to college. You got 3-4 years, and now you're drafted, extremely high. What change or changes did you make from high school into college that maybe that changed the miles per hour on the gun, how you pitched? What were the changes that you made and that they saw in you that they implemented?
You know what? I got to be honest with you. There was really no changes made to how I threw a baseball. It was late bloomer physically. I mean, that's what it was. I went to college. I was 5'11", 165 pounds, throwing 83, 84 miles an hour. Well, all of a sudden, I get 3/4 of an inch in height, and all of a sudden put on 20 pounds in weight, 15, 20 pounds. I just got physically stronger. So that 82, 83, 84 mile an hour fastball went to 90 to 93 miles an hour. And the one thing that I'd always worked on with my dad is, he once said, he's like, I never understood why left-handed pitchers always had control problems. They're always wild. And so he always, when we would go out and play, he always emphasized command. Throw the ball where you want it. Be able to put the ball where you want it. Eyes on the target. Boom, shoulder, drive it, hit your target over and over and over again. It wasn't how hard I could throw it. It was how accurate I could be with it. So I always had that trait. And then all of a sudden you add the physicality to it and the miles per hour. And now 93, 92 in college, wherever you want to put it, becomes deadly. And then you can just start carving people up. And that's what happened.
I'll never forget the first time. And I played baseball Division III in St. Louis. And I remember the first time I faced a guy who threw 92, 93. And he carved me up like a Thanksgiving dinner. I mean, it was, you're used to most guys throwing maybe mid 80s, at least in our it was Division III, low Division III. And then a guy comes up there throwing 93 and it looks like 115. Yeah. And it was, fastball, paint the corner, set up pitch slider. And you're like, tip your cap. I'm like, that's what it's all about. And he ended up being drafted. I forget what happened to him, but you're right. That 92, 93 is huge.
Yeah, well, and think about what guys are throwing nowadays.
Right,
that
exactly.
was the 92, 93. You got some guys throwing 92-mile-an-hour changeups.
Right.
It's crazy. That was the wonderful thing about playing in the National League and getting a chance to hit again. Because at every level I played with, I even got to hit a little bit at Wright State. Not that I was setting the world on fire, but I got to hit in college. Mm-hmm. And now all of a sudden in the pros, I'm getting a chance to hit when I get taken by them in the expansion draft. And I'll never forget a game. We were playing the Chicago Cubs, and it was in Arizona, and Kerry Wood was on the mound. And he threw me a fastball, 2 strikes, and he threw me a fastball. It looked like a balloon. I mean, it looked huge. And I'm like, I am going to mash this thing. Came out of his hand, and I'm like, I'm all over this. And, of course, I swing and miss, strike 3. And I remember walking back towards the dugout, and I peeked up at the radar gun, and it was 98 miles an hour. And I'm like, okay, I get it. I mean, you hear that sound that comes with the velocity, and it's amazing how fast it can jump on you. And listen, speaking about the game today, you see pitchers and how effective they are with fastballs up in the strike zone, where guys can't lay off of them, but they can't really handle them either. They can't drive them, they can't get on top of them, and that's a very effective pitch. And if you think about it, and this is again, getting a chance to hit the National League and facing these tough pitchers, if you think about it, it makes perfect sense. When you're hitting in the big leagues and the guy's got velocity or a good slider and they throw it down and away from you, that pitch, you see only the top half of the baseball as it works its way downhill, and it looks small and it looks far away from you. The elevated fastball, as you're standing there as a hitter, it's elevated. So guess what? It's closer to your eyes, and your eyes now see the whole baseball. And it looks big. And a big baseball tells your brain, I can mash this thing. I mean, what do hitters say when they get a pitch out over the plate and they crush it? Boy, that thing looks like a balloon. Well, when it pitches up in your eyes, at letter high, it looks like a balloon because it's close to your eyes. You see the whole thing. So you're like, I'm going for this. Yeah, except the elevation's a little too much and you'll never get there. And that's why that pitch becomes so effective.
Right. And especially nowadays, because you have players that are hitting the ball. You talk about, I don't want to say the uppercut, but guys are trying to hit the ball with more backspin. So they're hitting.
No, you're right. No, you stick with the uppercut because you're right. Everybody's got loft in their swing.
Loft in their swing because it creates backspin, not to get too technical, but it creates backspin. And so they're hitting over shifts. They're hitting the ball in the air. They're hitting line drives. And so you're right. They're already pre-programmed to look for pitches up in the zone versus down in the zone. And pitchers can fine. Go ahead. Try to hit this.
And guess what? This is where the sticky stuff comes in. We've all heard about the sticky stuff. I did a deep dive on the sticky stuff. Spider tack. What do you call it? They would use the pine tar and sunscreen.
Sunscreen.
All the different things that you could use. Spider tack being probably the stickiest of the substances. And what that allowed you to do was it allowed you to increase your spin rate. Everybody's big into spin now because you're able to quantify these things, study them, and understand their effects. And it's called the Magnus effect. And if you can spin a ball faster, you don't change the velocity at all. But if you spin it faster, gravity doesn't have the same pull on it. So of this catalog of pitches that a hitter has built up since he's probably been 2, 3, 4 years old, they recognize a pitch. A ball out of the hand. They say fastball. They know what the pitcher's velocity is because there's scouting reports and they've seen pitches. So they see the pitch, they recognize it, and their bat goes to where that pitch is supposed to be, except that pitch is 2 or 3 inches above the bat. And that's why the sticky stuff had to get out of the game because it was cheating and gave pitchers an advantage that was every big as the steroid era. And like I said, I did a deep dive into it because I found it so fascinating and interesting how I would watch guys throw 92 miles an hour out over the heart of a plate, and you'd do a super slow-mo of the swing, and the guy was missing it by inches. He was on time with his swing, but it was under the ball by inches. I'm like, how are they missing by that much? And then all of a sudden you hear about the sticky stuff, the effect it's having on the game. Baseball wants it out. I started to study it, read some fascinating articles on it, and did my research and realized, oh my gosh, what a racket for these pitchers.
Oh, yeah.
And what an advantage it gave them.
A lot of good stuff on Fangraphs. I know the Athletic had some good stuff on correlating the Magnus effect and the spin rates and all that. And I remember Nolan Ryan talking about how a fastball can have ride to it. And he talks about the ride. Normally a fastball might break, has a little tail, but he always talked about a good fastball. It's almost like a ball. It's probably more of a optical illusion, but it seems like it has a little jump at the end, even though it probably doesn't. But that sticky stuff keeps that ball from breaking. And if you get on top of it, like you said, the results are devastating.
They call it the rising fastball. It doesn't rise. It just doesn't come down as much as it should.
Right.
And it stays on the same plane. And your brain and your eyes are fooled, and it should be here, and it's not there. And that's why they had to get that out, or at least do their best to try and get it out.
So let's go. Go ahead, John. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Scott.
I was going to say something. You played in the Cape Cod League. Is that right?
Yes, I played for Wareham in '91. After I went to school in the fall of '90.
Right.
So it was after the baseball season in '91. I stayed in Dayton and I played in a local league there. I had gone and tried out actually for the Pan Am team, and I was there for about 2 weeks. And Ron Nischwitz, our head coach at Wright State, sent me there for the exposure. Thought that it would be beneficial and it would lead to some opportunities for summer ball. And I got an offer to play in the Alaskan League, which was probably the second tier league. I mean, it's still one of the best. But the top league was Cape Cod. And I got an invite there too, and I chose not to. A horrible decision. I wanted to stay back in Dayton and play with my college buddies in a higher end league there, but it wasn't the same. Regretted the decision. And about a month into it, got a call from the Cape Cod and said, hey, we had a guy that we had to send home. Are you interested? He couldn't even finish the sentence. I'm like, the baby blue 85 Ford Tempo is on its way right now. And so I packed up and went up there and played for Wareham. 92, made the Olympic team. That was another crazy story. The Olympic team in 92, you had 40 invites that they were going to give that were paid invites to college players to come down in Millington, Tennessee and try out for the team. But before that, they had open tryouts. And so I basically got a preferred walk-on invite from head coach Ron Frazier, like, we're not going to pay your way, but we'd like for you to come down. So I go down to that. You'd fly into Memphis, wait at the airport for a white van to pick you up and a bunch of other players and take you to Millington. And I was sitting there with a young ball player and, he asked me, what position, left-handed pitcher, sophomore, Wright State. And he told me later that he thought to himself, you've got no chance. I mean, you look like you're 12 years old. You're from Wright State. You're a sophomore, whatever. So he tells me, I ask him, shortstop, Georgia Tech, and I'm a freshman. And I'm thinking to myself, 92 was a really good year for upperclassmen shortstops. Chris Widger, Wichita State. There was a lot of good ones. And I thought, no chance you're going to make it as a freshman. And by the way, if I look like I'm 12, you look like you're 10. So, that was it. They bus us to Millington. There's over 200 kids there in the open tryout. We go through the open tryout. They end up keeping 9 of us for when the 40 come in. So now this other player and myself make it, and the 40 come in. We go through that tryout, that whole process. Now all of a sudden there's a 25-man roster. And lo and behold, we're both on it, looking at each other like, I didn't think you had a chance. He's like, I didn't think you had a chance. It was like that Spider-Man meme, point at each other. You didn't have a chance. And it turned out that at the end of the day, baseball in the Olympics is only a 20-man roster. So we traveled the country, the 25 of us. We went to Cuba. We went down into Holguin and played down there. I got an opportunity, because the Cubans back then, that was a professional team with aluminum bats playing kids. It was like Russia and the U.S. hockey in 80. That it was that kind of a deal. They were unbeatable. And I remember going down there and playing. We would go to the ballpark for a workout at 10 in the morning. There'd be 10,000 people in the stadium. By 1 o'clock in the afternoon, the stadium's filled. We wouldn't even play until 8 o'clock at night. It was insane down there. And then I can remember I got to start against them in this was great. It was not Coors Field, Mile High Stadium in Denver. Mile High Stadium. I started against them on the 4th of July. 70,000 people. I have never pitched in a stadium that had more people in it. Browns fans and Browns players can remember in Mile High Stadium, they had those metal bleachers. So they would start kicking the metal bleachers, stomping their feet. And I can remember standing out there to get ready to start that game. And the pitching rubber was actually vibrating because of the stomping of all that feet. But anyway, yeah, so that was just, an interesting time. I have no idea how I got off on that tangent where I was supposed to go. Kind of went crazy there.
But yeah, you're talking about the Cape Cod League, and Scott.
Oh yeah, so I ended up back in Wareham after I ended up getting cut and played up there, and that was great because tons of scouts. You think about all the showcases that go on nowadays for kids, and back then the Cape Cod League was the elite college player playing in a league where they use wooden bats.
Yes,
and so
right.
Scouts would go up there and say, "This is the closest look we can get to the best of the best in a professional type setting as far as, what you're using, a wood bat league." And so, that was why it became, such a big deal. And they brought up the best college players. They had all the scouts there. You played for the summer and you could either raise or tank your stock as an individual, in one summer.
Did when you played in the Cape Cod League, did you think that was the talent level overall better than your college experience? Because of the players. Yeah. I mean, I know that seems like an obvious question. It was the best
players on each team. It was like, your starting rotation was the ace of Arkansas, the ace of Indiana State. Your third baseman was from LSU. You had a University of Texas center fielder who was the best player in the Big 12. I mean, it was the best. It was like college all-star teams.
Wow.
Playing. And so the competition was awesome. Now, the one thing that kind of evened it out, is pitching's pitching, but a lot of these kids were using wood bats for the first time. So it was extremely tough on hitters because the sweet spot on a wood bat is much, much smaller than it was on aluminum back then.
Yeah. Well, Scott had an opportunity, or you want to explain that real quick about your opportunity?
I think my dad always kind of blows this out of proportion a little bit, but a buddy of mine who doesn't really know anything about baseball said, "Hey, there's this Cape Cod League," because I was in college from 92 to 96. "Hey, you can live up here, you can work it up here, and you can play in the Cape." Now, I didn't know much about the Cape Cod League at the time. And he gave me a phone number. I never called it. I didn't have the money to go up there. And if I would have known then what I know now, there's absolutely no way I would have played up there. I just thought it was a summer league. I didn't realize it was what you described.
Well, yeah, but you know what? You'd be surprised. No, listen, it is the best of the best from around the country, but you could still have played. I guarantee you. We had guys that you'd have injuries. Sometimes you'd have a guy get sent home, or he would just, whatever, for whatever reason. And sometimes they would use a lot of local kids from local colleges to come in and fill out a roster. So, you absolutely, and they could hold their own. I mean, it's baseball. Right. It's baseball. And maybe over the course of 162 games, some guys aren't going to be able to, but for a summer and getting that opportunity, boy, that would have been really cool if you would have got a chance to do that, because I would have been there in 92. So
that's one regret. Right. Maybe that's one regret in my life, playing sports and not playing football in high school was the other one. I wish I would have done that, but playing in that Cape Cod League, I mean, I've seen games up there because my buddy runs the Chatham Airport. He's the manager of the airport up there. And we go up there and visit, and it's just so cool. You sit back there. My kids were little at the time. One of the scouts gave my kids the radar gun and to play with. It's from a fan perspective, it's so fun, low key. You enjoy great baseball. It's small town America. It's just fun all around.
It's very intimate.
Yep. Very, very intimate. And you're getting to see future big leaguers, a lot of future big leaguers. And so, it sets up for a great summer trip. If you love baseball, you love amateur baseball, and the Cape is gorgeous. That's the other thing. I look back now and I'm like, really? You played summer ball in the Cape Cod? We had a job too. You had a job that you lived with a foster family, I guess, or a sponsor family, and you had a job. Mine was, I would work baseball camps during the week from 8 to 12. and then you'd go to the deli, get a sandwich, go back, take a nap, get to the field, and play a game that night. That's what your summer was. And you think about doing it on the beautiful Cape Cod and look back all these years later, and you're like, you talk about, something wasted on youth.
Right.
Because you don't really appreciate it at the time.
Yeah.
You look back and go, you got to do that, and you didn't embrace it more than, it's that whole saying. But yeah, it was great. Great time.
My buddy, even to this day, goes, you could have worked as a hotel concierge and done that. And then you could have played baseball. And like I said, I had no clue. I'm like, yeah, whatever. Now I conceptualize it and realize, damn, that would have been really cool to do.
Yes, it would have. Yes, it would have. I'm angry at you for not going up there.
Thank you very much for that.
Hey, speaking of opportunities, Brian, you got an opportunity to play with some of the best offensive baseball teams of all time, ones that have never won anything. When I mean won anything, won a World Series, I'm talking about the 97 Indians, and you played for the 97 Indians and the 96 Indians as well. I know that was I don't want to relive the World Series or anything like that, but just give us like some fun stories or the experience of being around those guys, around those teams. I know Albert Belle was gone from there, but you still had Manny, you still had Tommy. You had a bunch of other guys there in Grover. What was that like playing for the Indians there in the mid to late 90s for those 2 years? I know you played again in 2003, but it was a completely different time.
It really, the 2001 Arizona Diamondback team that I played on was a very confident team. And of course, we won the World Series that year against the New York Yankees. The Indians teams that I played on were the most confident, quietly arrogant teams that I have ever been on. The old Al Davis, just win big. That's kind of like those Indians teams. I mean, we would show up for batting practice, and a couple of guys would have on their BP jersey. Some guys would have a red pullover on, some guys a blue pullover, hats backwards, maybe no hats at all. But it was just win. Just go out and win. And it was a professional group once the game started, but there was a lot of personality. There were unbelievable ball players. Hitters that, you think about some of those lineups. I look back at some of them and I chuckle. Manny Ramirez hitting in the 7 hole.
Right.
Sandy Alomar hitting 8th or 9th. Really? I mean, that's how deep these lineups were. And I did get a chance to play with Albert.
You're right. In 96.
96.
You're right. Yeah, because Bell left after 96.
That's right. And I'll never forget, we were in Milwaukee, and early in the game, Eddie Murray's at the plate. Albert Belle's on first base.
Is this the Fernando Vina story?
Yeah.
And
a lot of people don't know what happened. They know, Albert Belle had a reputation. And all of a sudden you see him forearm shivering Fernando Vina out into left field. And you're like, well, of course, the big jerk, he's mean, he's this, he's that. Well, I'll tell you what happened in that game. Early in that game, Belle's on first. Eddie Murray's at the plate. Eddie Murray rolls over a ground ball to second base. Fernando Vina comes in, fields it. Albert Belle pulls up. Fernando tags him, throws around him, double play. When that half inning was over, or when that play was over, Eddie Murray took Albert Belle down in the little tunnel behind the dugout, and in no uncertain terms said, they want to field a ground ball like that and get in your way in the middle of a baseline. You do what you got to do. Don't pull up, because you pull up, he tags you, throws around you, double play. And so Eddie Murray set him straight on that. And wouldn't you believe it? Later in the game, the same scenario. And Albert's on first, and Eddie rolls over another one. And Fernando has it there, thinking Belle's going to pull up. He's going to tag him, get the double play. And Albert forearm shivered him out into left field. And so, dirty play, I don't know. That was a lesson learned by Albert. Talked to him by Eddie Murray after the same scenario happened earlier in the game. And that was one of those stories where I'll never forget that one, because I can remember, because we emptied the benches a couple of times. And I was chirping about Fernando Vina, and Charlie Manuel's like, hey, how many times do we have to go out there? He's right there. If you want him, go get him. Quit talking here on the bench. And that was Charlie telling me to stay in my lane, youngster.
Well,
Well,
Bell
that's
got
funny.
suspended 5 games. He got reduced to 3 games. And let's just be real. The reason why he got suspended was because his name is Albert Belle.
Correct.
Do you know, did Eddie Murray ever like pay him the money for the money that he missed out on those suspensions?
No, and you know what? And Eddie Murray still owes me money from the NCAA basketball tournament pool from back in those days, because I remember, and I want to say it was Syracuse who I had in the tournament. That would be interesting to go back and look up. But whoever I had made it all the way to the finals. So I was due a big payday, win or lose. I was going to get first place money. I was going to get second place money. Problem is, boys, I had gotten sent to Durham before that game was played.
Oh,
So guess what? You're not here. You don't get that money. And I never got my money and I finished second. My team did not win that season, but I never got my winnings either, even when I got back to the big leagues.
You were right. Syracuse lost in the national championship game that year in '96 to Kentucky.
There you go. I'm owed like $800 from that. So I'd like that money too.
Have you seen Eddie Murray since then? And if you have, do you ever give him a hard time?
I have not. And I'll tell you, he was an interesting guy, because I don't think that Eddie Murray got along with the media very well at all his entire career. But I can't remember him anything bad about him as a teammate. He was a great teammate. That's how all those guys were. You know, there were a lot of big personalities, but it was a team. It policed itself. There was no hijinks that went on. Well, I shouldn't say that. There were hijinks, but not hijinks that applied to the game itself. And it was just a fun, powerful, amazing team to be a part of. I'll give you one other Albert Belle story, was the thermostat story.
Mr. Freeze.
Yeah. So I was up there. I was pitching the next night. So I was up scouting the game and doing the pitch chart like you normally did. I like to do it off the TV if I could, because that gave you a better perspective on location, where you couldn't always get that from on the bench. And so I'm scouting from up there on the TV, and Albert was DHing that night. I believe he was. Anyway, what he did was he would always come back up into the clubhouse after his ABs, and so he had his at bat. Didn't go very well. He came up there. You could see him looking around. It was, I guess, too warm for him. So he went over, turned all the thermostats down a little bit, and that was it. Well, the clubhouse crew came in and put him back to normal. Long story short, or maybe long story long, second at bat, same thing, turned it back up, and he's not having a good night at the plate. Third at bat, same thing. He comes back up into the clubhouse, feels that it's warm again, and he's having a rough night. And finally, I watched him walk over to his locker, pull out a baseball bat, and then he walks to each thermostat individually, turns it all the way down, and then takes the bat to it and takes it right off the wall. Then walks to the other one, turns it all the way down, bat to, I think there were 3 of them total. And so when that game was over, it was freezing in the clubhouse. I mean, it was Arctic in the clubhouse. And I'll never forget the next day when we came back in, they had taken plywood and put it over the holes that he created in the walls where the thermostats were. And then someone had used a Sharpie to draw in thermostats with the temperature gauge. It was pretty funny, but yeah, I was there for that. And that was something else.
Albert Belle, very intelligent guy. I mean, he gets a bad rap. Very smart guy, though.
Yep, and a great teammate. It was funny, but when I was at Wright State, I had an Albert Belle poster in my room, in my bedroom, and then getting a chance to play for him. And remember, 96, and even in 97, I spent a lot of time at Buffalo. I was back and forth quite a bit. It was like whoever was hot in Buffalo would get called up for a start or two, and then you were sent back. And Albert Belle, even as a part-time teammate, he treated me like gold. I mean, he didn't have to. He didn't even probably need to know my name, but he was a tremendous teammate. I loved Albert.
I think it was Kenny Lofton that nicknamed that incident or Bell Mr. Freeze, I believe. Is that true?
That I don't know. I mean,
Okay.
Mr. Freeze, yes, because it absolutely was when that game was over. I'm not sure who gave him the moniker, but it was well-deserved.
Hey, John, do you remember the baseball card that you got signed by Albert Belle? And it was a Joey Bell baseball card. Do you remember that at Double Play?
Oh, yeah, I do. I was so scared. Brian,
Oh,
do
this is a
you remember
great
the double play batting cages around the Akron, Canton area?
Like
Do not.
it was, just a batting cage, putt course. Albert Belle was going to come to one of them. This was, I think, Scott, 96, maybe
93,
93.
Yeah.
And I had a Joey Belle card. I think Scott might've given me. And of course, everyone that knows who listened to this, Albert Belle changed his name to Albert, or didn't like the name Joey. I don't know the whole story behind it, but didn't like it. And I gave it to him to sign. And I was so scared because Belle just looked like he was, would freak out. He just, as a little kid, you're just nervous. And I think, Scott, did he end up signing it?
He signed it.
He signed it, but he had this look like he didn't want to be there and really didn't want to be there after signing it.
But he signed it. I remember that. You were scared. You were like 7, 8 years old and you were scared. And, everything worked out okay.
Hearing the story now, I'm scared for you. Yeah, that's a gutsy move going up to Albert with the Joey Belle card, because that name, you call him Joey Belle and you're liable to have a mouthful of teeth.
Right.
He was not it wasn't just that he didn't like that name. Oh man. I mean that name, I guess in this day and age with the millennials being triggered, call Albert Joey. That's a trigger, and it's not going to end well for you.
Right. Yeah, Scott I almost got beat up by Albert Belle. Because
I was going to say, your brother was sending you to the executioner. He was like, go have him sign it. And wondering if you'd come back to him.
Right. So real quick, Brian, so you had, shifting gears here, you had Tommy John surgery. Is that right?
Twice.
How is your elbow now?
I could go out, play catch, throw, long toss. I could do everything and really wouldn't notice it. I had Tommy John in 2005, had pitched basically the entirety of 2004 with it torn. And then in 2005 in spring training, it was still hurting. I thought maybe the off season of rest would calm it down. As soon as I started throwing again, it flared back up. I took, whatever. It ended up getting taken care of in 2005. Tried to come back probably a little bit too quickly in 2006 for the Texas Rangers. Buck Showalter had brought me in when he was the manager there. Blew it out again. So I had the surgery in 2005, another one in 2006. That was the second one. I took 2007 off, which is when I got involved in doing some TV stuff up in Cleveland because I was rehabbing back home. The Indians at that point were on STO, which was a relatively new program or station. They weren't even yet 24-hour-a-day program. So they were looking to add programming, and knowing that I was up in town, rehabbing, they got a hold of me and said, hey, would you be interested in doing a weekly show called The Tribe Report with Al Pulowski? Mm-hmm. So we were the original two doing that show. And so we would tape it down in downtown once a week. And, I did that, rehabbed all of 2007, and then tried to come back again in 2008 with the Rays. And in my second spring training outing, I ended up blowing it out again. And I had really tough time with my hand after the second surgery because of the ulnar nerve. I was in hand therapy for 4 months trying to get that thing to work again. I mean, to this day, I've got areas of my left arm that are just completely dead from nerve. And so after the third time that I blew it out, there was no chance I was doing that surgery again, because there was a real good chance that I'd end up with a shriveled hand. It wouldn't work. It wouldn't be functional. So I retired. That was it. And then I ended up coaching staff and then on to the TV broadcasting that I do now. But all that to say, if you guys wanted to ever go out and play catch and even long toss, perfectly fine to do it. May feel like I have a headache in my elbow the next day, but it handles it just fine. All the scar tissue it's done its job.
Man, Brian, where were you during those Tampa media baseball games? Because we would play in it when I was working in Tampa. They would have these media games where they'd have these media batting practice, and Andy Sonnenstein would always throw me BP.
Yeah.
And Andy and I would hang out a little bit and man, I would have loved to. I took him deep 3 times, by the way.
Did you?
Yes.
Good for you.
Now he used a metal bat, though. Let's put it that way.
Hey, listen.
I did use a metal bat. When I use a wood bat, I did hit one off the wall.
Okay.
Hey, listen, it's all deadly. That's all good stuff.
That's right.
Those media games that you speak of, I would always find out and get invited. I shouldn't say get invited, but I would always find out about the media game either after it happened or the next day. I never got invited. It was crazy because I'd hear about it and be like, what? Why do we not know about this? Because I would go. It would be fun.
Well, it's funny. So this is obviously before COVID and everything. They haven't done one, I think, since probably 2019. But the funny thing was, we wouldn't know about it till the day before. So we'd get an email or a text from Rays, and I'm like, oh, I got it. I'm calling in sick from work. I'm sorry, or whatever. I'm switching my schedule. I'm working I'm coming in later. It was like, okay, this is a once in a year thing. I'm doing this. I'm not missing it. And thankfully for me and all my years down there, I got to do it every single year that they did it. So they first did the batting practice, then they turned it into a game. And it was like that, with a hard ball, 9 innings and everything, put it on the scoreboard. It was really cool. The Rays were great about it. And then then the last year in 2019.
Well, yeah, they were great about it, all but telling people.
True. Yeah. I mean, you had to sign your life away on a waiver, but I mean, you got to do that, right? And then the last year, you'll like this, Brian, the very last year, the week, they decided they did the game, and then they were going to do another batting practice session. And Scott and my niece and nephew were in town on spring break because they would always come down. And so I call up the Rays and I said, hey, listen, they're here. I want to surprise my nephew. He's a freshman in high school. We do it. And you know how the Rays media relations guys are awesome. And they're like, yeah, bring him down. So Scott got to take BP and it was, my gosh, who was pitching? It wasn't Andy this time. Who holds the stats in the press box? He's a coach, got the mustache. Oh my God, a former college coach there at the Trop there. Oh my gosh, what is his name? He's the stat keeper in the press box. You probably see him every single home game. You don't remember him.
No, you know what? But I don't. Yeah, I don't venture down there too much. The official scorekeeper.
Yeah, like he does it
Is it Bill Matthews?
I think it is Bill Matthews.
He's the official scorer. He's got a mustache, so he's doing all the official stats.
Yes, because he coached at Eckerd College, I believe.
Okay, yeah, then that's him. That's him.
So and he threw good BP too, by the way.
Yeah, he did. I remember that.
And he was critiquing, Scott's son, my nephew's swing and everything. And we had 20 minutes because I don't know what the time got shrunk down. And so I'm like, all right, Scott, we're just doing this. Let's bust it out. And so he did it. It was great. We had pictures on the field. We didn't hit any out that day, but it was a cool experience about those Rays media days. And I'm always bummed, like you were never there. I always wondered, but now we know why. You never.
I think it was by design, and I don't think it was because they thought that I would play very well. I just maybe think that people in the media relations department aren't a big fan. I don't know.
Maybe you'd have struck out everybody.
Well, I probably wouldn't have pitched. I wouldn't have won it. That's what I did. Let me go play another position.
Right. So 2 more questions, and then we'll let you go. You were in the expansion draft back in 98. It was
the 98 season. That I think the draft happened in November of 97 because it was shortly after we had gotten, taken out by the Marlins.
November 18th, 1997.
How was that? Well, go ahead, John.
Yeah, November 18th, 1997.
Okay, yeah. Yep.
So how was that experience, the expansion draft? It's something that, I've only known of a couple of these in the last 30 years when they expanded a couple of times in the 90s. What were your thoughts on that when you were involved with it? Was it just kind of just another, you look back another chapter, but were there any, I don't know, knowing that you were in it, how was it?
Well, interesting. I didn't know that I was in it. That was the thing. So we had lost to the Marlins, obviously, in the World Series. And I can remember getting back into Cleveland as devastated as we all were. And of course, your mind as an athlete immediately thinks to next year. Well, next year, we're going to make sure that this pain goes away. And so you're already starting to focus on the 1998 season. And, at that time, I had bought my first home and I was living on the west side. The only time I ever lived on the west side of Cleveland. But I lived in North Olmsted, had a little a ranch over there. And I can remember I was sweeping in the living room and it was early November and Peter Gammons was talking and he said, there's going to be 3, players, available because I had heard through the grapevine, through my contacts that I was going to be protected and on the 40-man roster, you were allowed to protect 15 guys. And then the Rays or the Devil Rays at the time and the Diamondbacks would then pick a team from each team until every team had a player taken, and then they could dip back into your team again. But once you got a player taken the first time, you could then pull 3 more players off the 40-man roster. You could protect 3 more players. That's how it worked. So I had heard through the grapevine that I was going to be protected. I was at a Cavs game and that I was going to be protected. And then all of a sudden I hear Peter Gammons mention my name of maybe not being protected. Jeff Suppan, Brian Anderson, or you're going to potentially be left out there. And I can't, Tony Saunders from the Marlins, he mentioned our names. Three pitchers going to be, left unprotected, or that's what he was saying. Saunders, Anderson, Suppan. As soon as I heard that, I was like, wait a minute. I thought I was going to be protected. So I got my agent involved. He started doing some digging, and he got back to me, and maybe it was the day or two before the draft, and said, I don't think you're going to be protected. And if you're not protected, you're more than likely going to get picked quick. And I'm like, no way. So I had gone down to Wright State for a function and was in the training room. Tony Ortiz was the head trainer down there when I was playing. And we were in the training room as the expansion draft started. And the Diamondbacks had won the toss. And you could either pick first, or you could concede that pick, defer the pick to the Devil Rays, and then you get picks 2 and 3. And that's what they did. They won the toss. They gave it to the Devil Rays. I think they knew the Devil Rays were taking Tony Saunders. And so they come out, they take Tony Saunders, and then here comes Jerry Colangelo, and he walks out there and he says my name. And I was just like, you got to be kidding me. I just went from a World Series to an expansion team in a blink of an eye, and had to scramble to a local mall in Fairborn, Ohio, Dayton, Ohio, and get a suit or get something that resembled a suit and get on a plane, get my butt out to Phoenix for the press conference the next day. And so that's how it happened. It all came together quickly. I really didn't know that I was a part of the process till the very end. And it was a shock, let's just say.
Were you at the Cavs game when you found out, or were you already home?
I was at the Cavs game and had run into someone in the front office that had whispered, you're going to be protected. That's where I found out that I was going to be protected.
Okay.
And then apparently there was and I'm sure they had meetings going right up until that draft, and I was a late subtraction, and they added somebody back on there, and then once I was exposed, I was picked up by the Diamondbacks.
I looked up that Cavs game, by the way. Remember who they were playing?
Not a clue.
Jordan and the Bulls.
Okay, that must not have been the Cavs game that I was in. I don't remember ever seeing him in person. This would have been at some point in early, before that draft.
Okay.
But yeah, I don't recall it was that game. I would think that I would have remembered that game. Hopefully, I would have remembered that game.
I think you would have remembered because the Cavs won by 21, and that rarely ever happened against Jordan and the Bulls. November 18th.
No. In fact, he just ripped their heart out all the time.
Yeah. I'm looking at the stats right here for November 18th, 1997. It was one of the rare late 90 Cavs wins, and that was
timeout. So that was the day of the draft, correct?
Yeah. So you come to think of it,
I was in Dayton. So
okay.
It was a Cavs a home game before that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I was going to say what a coincidence that would have been. But hey, you know what, Brian? It worked out because yes, you left your childhood favorite team, but you ended up winning a World Series with them, and you ended up coming back for a little small stint, little cup of coffee a few years later. Granted, it was a much different Indians team than in 2003.
Yeah.
And then you played 3 more years with the Royals. All right, we've taken too much of your time, but I can't let you go without asking you about what do you think the Guardians are going to be this year? And of course, your Rays are going to be stocked and going to be playing really well too. But what do you think about the Guardians and the way they're constructed?
Obviously, they're hoping that the pitching staff can carry them and hope that they can start to build some sort of a core group of position players that will be a part of the future. But it looks to be right now on paper that it's a middle of the road team. I mean, it's who they were last year. They've got some really good young starters, and that has a chance to keep them in a lot of games. So, they could surprise you too. I think they're an absolute coin flip.
And they've got really good position minor leaguers, Brian, but they're not ready yet.
Right. And that's it. Who's going to be a part of the core? Who's going to be a part of the group getting opportunities when these kids come up and the younger starting pitching matures, and now you've got a team to put out there. But it seems to me to be a team that's in a transition year, but could surprise. You know, when I was at the Indians in 2003, I got traded late that year. I was having a pretty good year with the Tribe that year, and I got traded late in the year to the Kansas City Royals, who were in contention unexpectedly. They had gotten off to that unbelievable start in 2003 and put themselves in position to go for a playoff spot. So something like that could happen too, out of nowhere. They're certainly in the right division that they could make a move like that. Even though the division has gotten stronger, they still could surprise some people. But it is a coin flip year for the Guardians, I think.
And we haven't had, really, when you think about it, a bona fide outfield bat since Manny Ramirez. I mean, think about that. Yeah, you had Grady Sizemore, but really, it's been, was that 22 years since we've had a bona fide outfield bat? I mean, that's a long time.
Wasn't it last year where going into camp there were like 10 outfielders on the 40-man roster?
And when you look at
for anybody. Bradley Zimmer, I feel like Bradley Zimmer is like 35 years old. I mean, he's been getting opportunity after opportunity after, just hoping that athleticism can blossom into being a baseball player. They have, you're right. I mean, the infield or the Guardian outfield situation has not been ideal, no doubt.
And you look at one of the Saber, I do a lot of stat stuff. And when you look at the amount of runs that the outfield creates, I mean, you look at all of the teams in the last 40 or 50 years, and there's a lot of individual seasons there. And the last couple of years, the Indians have been virtually dead last. I mean, that's pretty bad. I mean, the outfield just doesn't create runs.
No. And that's such a huge part of the game. They want some sort of creation at every position, or certainly as a group. And when you're not getting it and you have to rely too heavily on the pitching staff, that's a surefire way to be a mediocre 500 team.
Well, Brian, we want to thank you very much for joining us here. This your insight and just telling stories and just hearing stories, some of the ones that we kind of had an inkling about, and then you kind of just added some flair to them and giving us, some of the behind the scenes there, especially about Albert Belle. That was classic stuff. But thank you very much for joining us on our podcast, and I'm sure we'll have you on at some point in the future.
Oh, hey, listen, I would love to. It's easy conversation. It's fun conversation. Love both of your work. Love the fact that you're getting to work together now. What a thrill for you guys. At least I think so. I don't know. If you,
oh yeah,
if you
absolutely.
Sending your brother to Albert with a Joey card. I don't know how thrilling it is for you all, but that's just great. And I have loved the time that I got to spend with you tonight.
Yeah, Brian, it was awesome. We appreciate it. We'll talk again soon. Good luck with opening day and everything. And tell the old neighborhood West Chase I said hi.
I will do that. I will absolutely do that. And thank you for all the tips on local doctors, because I don't have any down here.
There you go. No problem, buddy. All right, man. We'll talk soon.
Take care.
Yeah. Well, Scott, what did I tell you? We were going to go long.
Oh my God, that was classic stuff. I didn't realize until doing some research here and then talking to him, he played in the Cape Cod League, which is really cool. And just, I mean, being a Cleveland fan and growing up and going to the stadium for the very first time, anybody who's listened to this, who went to the old stadium or even Progressive Field or Jacobs Field, that feeling when you first walk onto a professional Major League Baseball field, just hearing someone else share that story, it's something for me personally that never gets old.
You know what else too is when you see pictures on Twitter of these baseball accounts that show old pictures of an old stadium that has the tunnel leading in there, what Ryan described and what you described from the old Cleveland Stadium. I remember that too. It's always cool, and it does resonate well with us and what we remember. I really loved his old Indian stories. Some of those we had already heard. I know a lot of our listeners probably have never heard of those stories regarding or the background story of the Fernando Vina Albert Belle incident, or the incident of Albert Belle and the thermostats. Us being members of the media and knowing people in the business, we had heard those, but it's great to hear Brian, who was on that team in the locker room,
right?
A witness to all that.
Right, he's charting pitches, and Albert Belle's, he's not having a good day. Here we go, boom, boom, boom.
That was really cool. And then his time being, like you said, growing up in Ohio and being an Indians fan, and his dream of wanting to be drafted didn't happen, but ended up getting traded to the Indians was pretty cool too.
Absolutely. So I want to thank Brian Anderson for being on the podcast here today. Check out this episode if you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts. We're also on Spotify, and you can check out all of our other episodes that we have on the Sabol Brothers of the Baseline podcast on Apple, Spotify, or if you're at work, you're at work on your PC, you can go to Press Play Podcast, go to the website, and you can see a whole link there, a bunch of links on our past episodes, and just have some fun with it. Or if you're listening to it, maybe driving into work, just put it on and then maybe come back to it on your drive home.
Hope you guys really enjoyed our conversation with former Indians pitcher Brian Anderson. And we'll see you guys next time.